Welcome to Hack and Grow Rich, another episode. I am here with my co-host today, Bart Baggett, who is a success and motivational coach. He handles masterminds for groups of high-achieving individuals and is just an all-around interesting guy, but very well-versed in what we're going to be talking about today, which is the language of wealth. And Bart, I remember you actually authored a book about wealth. What was the title of that?
This actually will be the 20th anniversary this year, Shaahin, of the Success Secrets of the Rich and Happy. And again, if you're just tuning in, Shaahin, who is the host and brainchild of this, is one of the most successful people in so many different businesses, from when he's 19 years old to selling pills, and he's got a book on it, to now hacking Amazon. So you're in really good company if you want to learn some tips on how to get wealthy. So Shaahin, the book, which was about kind of a combination of all the research I had done at that time in my life, where you're talking about all the different books on thinking and of building businesses and changing your language and changing your emotional state, from Robert Kiyosaki to Tony Robbins to NLP, like I combined them all. But one of my favorite chapters was about language, was about how to control that internal voice. And I think today's topic, we're going to show and talk about some like 5 key ideas and concepts, some language words that you need to know if you want to have an intelligent conversation with wealthy people. But more importantly, how do you train your brain? How do you train your brain in the language of making money and not losing money?
I love it. I love it. So, child of the 80s, and I know you lived through the 80s, it's obvious. Do you remember, for all of you guys listening in or watching in, there was this whole decade called the 80s where I'm going to lean in like my mom does when she's about to tell me something. We did not have the internet. We did not have cell phones. And how did we follow? Do you remember who the guy was who led us all into the lives of the big ballers in that era? Who was the one guy that we all watched that we were like, dude, wow. I was addicted to the show. Do you remember the show?
I'm going to go with MTV Cribs.
Okay, before MTV Cribs, that was 90s.
I think I'm going to miss this one, dude. I don't know. I can't wait to hear.
Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
Oh, that guy. Yes, it was so like gold and the boats and the yachts. And he's always got this English accent. We're on an island in St. Kitts. And today we're going to meet the great actor. That was him, right?
Robin Leach. That's right. I mean, I remember being a preteen Iranian boy, new to this country, and that would be on, I think it was like once a week. We would be glued to the TV watching that guy. His thing was champagne wishes and caviar dreams.
That's so perfect. Well, it's funny because when I was a kid, I never thought I would ever live that lifestyle because it was so out of reach to where I came from. I mean, I'm middle class from Dallas, Texas. A funny story, I was sitting in this gym with my dad, and I was like 15 years old. I said, Dad, wouldn't it be great if we were millionaires? And he looked at me and goes, we are. And I'm like, no, we're not. We use coupons to buy pizza. Like we're sitting in a $10 a month health club. And he goes, no, we live like we're poor because we have assets. And I was like, I don't understand. But on the TV show, they have caviar and they have boats and they have helicopters. And It blew my mind because in that time, even now, you think a millionaire is a lot of money. But now the millionaire is the new billionaire, billionaire is the new millionaire. But you can have $1 million asset. The book by called The Millionaire Next Door really outlines a case that most of the millionaires in America are the guys that are driving 7-year-old cars, paid off houses, and they're never the guys flashing the bling. And that really opened my eyes about the language of wealth and how to think about that, because it's not about the crib.
Yeah, dude, like my circle of friends, I know lots of guys that I run with that are millionaires, and lots of guys, or I would say a handful that are actual billionaires, like real world billionaires. and I don't mean like we always talk about the LA or Miami millionaires, right? With the rented Lambos and the rented houses, and like the one guy we were talking about, he's not from this country, but he's like an online guy, and what he does is he rents a private airplane for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, where you pay $500. You're in there for 5 or 7 minutes, and you take all your Instagram photos in the private plane.
Oh, I did not know.
And then you get off, of course, and the next rapper guy goes on. And so this guy, he does that, and then he flexes with all those pictures. So the people I know, interestingly enough, very few millionaires. I'm the only guy I know that rolls in Porsches. And I'll tell you something. The cars that I buy and the cars that I take pictures with and whatnot, those cars make me money. I've never spent money on a car. A buddy of mine's like, dude, I just got this great deal on a lease and on a Honda. It's only like $380 a month, and I only had to put $2,000 down. And I was like, dude, I'm like, that's too expensive for me. Right? I buy high-end
positive cash flow.
I buy high-end supercars. I buy them at a discounted rate because I know how, and I drive them for a couple of years, and then I sell them always for more than what I buy them for. So for me, driving my cars, which for me, I have to say, cars are a symbol of coming up. And in my mind, growing up as a child, I had all those posters behind me of the Lamborghini Countach and of the Porsche. And, it was, like you said, it was so out of reach for me, right? Coming to this country from Iran. These were things I didn't really eat at a restaurant, until I was in my teens. Like, wow. I didn't understand what that level of wealth was even like, but I aspired to it. So when I get into my Porsche and I smell the leather of the seats and I turn it on, it makes the sound, and, I take it out and I feel like how it hugs the road. That's a reaffirmation of the language of wealth for me. But with that said, knowing that, I don't get attached to the cars. So in 2 years, when I'm ready, in a year when I'm ready, or when somebody makes me an offer that I think is great on the car, I end up reselling it, and then I'll buy another one. But my cars actually end up being an asset because they bring me profit. And even before that, I was buying cars here and there and renting them out. And I'd had my pick. I could drive any car that I wanted. And then, I could rent them out on one of the services like Turo when it was first starting. Now it's become a little bit of a pain, so I don't really do it because there's too many moving parts.
Yeah, if you calculate the value of your time, and I know how much value your time, it may not be worth renting it out. But the fact is, for somebody listening, including me, I always have been told a new car is a liability. A payment is a liability. And I want to collect assets and cash flows. One of the new wealth movements, especially among the 20-somethings, is just getting high cash flow properties in bad parts of the country so that they can immediately quit their job. So their goal is to quit their job, have assets, and have positive cash flow, which may not necessarily be the fastest way to the most wealth in the end. As you know, real estate's gone up 15-20% as we're recording this. So if you had a $2 million house in LA, it's worth 2.7 now, right? It's really gone up tremendously compared to a bunch of apartments in Iowa. So there's a lot of negotiating how to do that. But let me ask you about the car thing, because we're talking about language. I don't think you could negotiate or know if you got a good deal if you didn't speak the language of exotic cars. Like if you didn't know about exotic cars.
Sure. I think you got to have that knowledge, right? But you can split up language in a couple different ways, I think, Bart. And I think you might agree with this, that there is self-talk, how we talk to ourselves, how we talk to others, right? And how we hear what's spoken to us. So I'm happily married, beautiful wife, beautiful boy. And I know that oftentimes when I talk to my wife, despite the clarity of my language, what she is hearing is something very different than what I am saying. So I think for our viewers and listeners to this podcast, We got to be clear about being able to, first and foremost, as we enter this conversation about the language of wealth, understand that there are at least three parts. And you, if you want to add on to this, by all means, I'm making this up as I go along. But there is the language that we speak to others, the language that we speak ourselves to ourselves, and the language that we process and take in. Would you agree?
I've never heard that model, but I think it's brilliant. So there's what's said, there's what's basically what's heard, and then I would add even an umbrella, which is if you don't have a clear understanding of any of the physical vocabulary words, you're going to be left behind. So even if you're in a relationship and you all speak the same language, your meaning of being loyal and her meaning of being loyal may be different. And that becomes a value conversation. And then you can have a huge fight. Let's use the word respect. It's probably the most common one. Your definition of respect and mine are probably a little bit different. And more importantly, Shaahin, what makes you feel disrespected? Like that's a deeper conversation you had with your business partners and your spouses, because even though we think we know what the word means, when we get to interpret it about a self, about ourselves. So if I say, Shane, you really disrespected me on the show when you said this, and you're like, dude, I didn't. What do you mean? I said you're that, and I'm like, well, what I felt was, and then you have this friendship conversation or relationship, and you work it out. But that kind of disrespect or conflict is what causes wars and lawsuits and partners to break up out of really good businesses, because even though they speak the same language. When I referred to vocabulary, I was literally saying that I can't go buy cars like you because I don't know the exotic and fast car business. I couldn't speak the language. They would see me coming and they'd say, like, that's a sucker. That's a newbie. That's a rookie. But you know what? I can speak the language of Bitcoin and real estate and book publishing and all the other things that I'm expert in, right? And 10 years ago, we weren't. So I guess one of the lessons I want to convey is that if you're new to any industry, real estate or investing or book publishing or Amazon, you got to do a deep dive into the business like you're in college. And as if you were studying golf or podiatry or anything, you're gonna acquire a big set of language of words. And when other people know those words, they'd immediately resonate with you. So I stopped by, just to give an example, I stopped by the Comedy Store recently, one of the comedy clubs, and immediately they knew I was professional because I spoke the language. I knew the inside language. A 5-minute set, 7-minute set. What's your hook? What's your callback? I knew the language, and they were like, "Oh, this guy's probably pretty good." Otherwise, you're on the outside looking in, hoping for acceptance. Now, obviously, no one here necessarily wants to be an actor or comedian, but whatever industry, if I've sitting down with a filmmaker, I know you've made films, right? We both made films. We can talk about budgets and films and sets and DPs and art directors with confidence because I know the language. If I didn't know the language, I couldn't have the conversation. So to go back to what you said, I would add that the language matches each one of those three categories that you mentioned.
Interesting. So I think you're just talking about physical syntax, which could likely be learned. But you're right. I think I would add to that, and I would say how you carry yourself also is very important. Like in martial arts, you always
Sure.
know the newbies coming in because of how they carry themselves, how they breathe, how they perceive the people around them, right? When you walk into a studio, if you've never sparred before and you walk into a new studio and you see a dude having, his face punched, you look at the look in their face and they're like, holy shit, what the fuck have I just gotten myself into? And you look at everybody else, they're like, oh yeah, that's Joey. He gets punched every 2 seconds. And the difference is, that the guys that walk in, the higher ranking guys, always carry themselves differently. So they speak that language, even though there's very little language spoken during sparring. But you're right. There is, you need to know what a jab is and a cross and an uppercut, and you need to know what a takedown is. And
so taking the jujitsu, or in my case, Shaolin Kung Fu, when we walk into that studio, we know what those terms mean. So there's no confusion and no hesitation. Do a jab, do a block, do a sweep kick. Because we know the vocabulary, now we have the internal sense of, yeah, I got that. I see what's coming. Yes, master. So then you've got all this conditioning of walking and having some kind of self-confidence, which you missed last episode. That's what we talked about, was how to build competence and competence. So it's a combination of those. But if I'm fighting a double degree black belt, I'm going to have a little doubt. Like my internal voice is like, okay, what do I get myself into? Compared to a green belt or a white belt who just showed up. Now I feel like I'm the teacher. Like I don't want to hurt him. Does that make sense? Like my internal dialogue is different from defense to offense, depending on the context. But generally, the internal dialogue would be understanding what's going on in that space, which is a great analogy. The dojo is a great space because you take that in the real world, in real estate, in Bitcoin, in Amazon marketing, and you need to compete with all these different tools. I mean, think about all the words that you teach your students, and let's say they study, but then they don't actually implement it. Like they have doubt.
Bart's talking about, guys, Amazon Mastery, which is our Amazon seller course where we teach people how to succeed and create recurring revenue streams that are predictable, that never fail time after time. So we have a course and a mastermind. If you're new to this podcast, we're not advertising it in this podcast. We'll talk about it a little bit at the end if anybody's interested. But what we do is we teach people how to succeed using Amazon's platforms and how to hack that whole ecosystem of e-commerce, starting with Amazon. And actually, what's interesting there, Bart, is that selling on Amazon, especially for new sellers, and this applies across the board to people who have experience selling in other platforms. This is to your point that there is a whole different language of selling on Amazon that allows people like yourself, like myself, who don't have the millions and millions of the big Fortune 50 corporations that are my clients, the Fortune 500 companies that hire me and they pay my rate and I do the work for them. We can compete with those companies now because of that language. But I will challenge you here in that language is not just the words. Copy is very important when you're selling on Amazon. And in your world of marketing online, you know how important copywriters are and writing those words. But it also extends out to the images. How you display those images is a whole language on Amazon. How you take the photographs, pricing, super important, right? What is the language of pricing for selling on Amazon? So I think this is a very powerful topic, Bart, that you've actually chosen, because can language extend out beyond all these other things? And we can even go into neurolinguistic programming. The map is not the territory. How do we create maps where people are influenced? And is that a language?
Well, NLP is definitely a version of sorting and cutting language and analyzing the internal voice to if someone's not familiar with it. It's definitely not an easy thing to define because now that it's been around for almost 35 years, it's in every communications book and every college in the country. You still hear elements from it from people like Tony Robbins and those people, but the language of English can be directed like copywriting to end up for people taking action. And that, of course, is a whole copywriting conversation to how do you elicit emotions and curiosity to take action and read that Amazon and go, whoa, this must be the best because there's 5 testimonials because they're doing all the strategy that you teach. But here's my point is let's say that someone goes to college for being an architect and they all pass. So they all have the vocabulary words of an architect. But why is one of them really successful and most of them can't get a job? Like that's what I'm talking about. So yes, you have the language to get in the room. If you're going to get into a new industry, you got to take the seminars in real estate. You got to take the seminars in Bitcoin. You got to do the work to be able to be conversationally fluent in a new business. But I think what you're talking about is how do you control your internal voices? How do you control your external state of mind? And how do you make sure that you're having full comprehension of these ideas? So in your case, we'll go back to the car analogy, you know what a good deal is. And then you know how to negotiate it. I know one of your close friends is the master negotiator, right? How do you negotiate on a $200,000 car that you know is worth 280? Like how do you go about that? And that's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, for those of you guys who don't know my book, which hasn't been released yet, but will be released, Billion: How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult. I just got the hardcover copy. Has a foreword by Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator who wrote Never Split the Difference. And I talk to Chris often about negotiation and those tactics. So it's interesting. You're right. You do have to know the language. You do also have to have the 3 pillars that we talk about, that Wayne has taught us, my friend and mentor, Wayne Boss, who talks about knowledge, courage, action. Got to have the knowledge, right? Where do you buy the cars, right? We know that exotic sports cars sell for up to 40% less in other states. So for example, a red Porsche in LA might not be a big deal because everyone's got a red Porsche seemingly, right? It's not out of the norm where we're at. But in a small town, like one of the small towns in Florida, somebody might have traded in a red Porsche, and in the South, in one of those states, and nobody wants a red Porsche. Nobody wants to stick out in a lot of these places, like Bible Belt, any of these places. So you may be able to walk in and to purchase one of these cars for 20 to 40% less in one of these states. And just by bringing it to California after you pay the taxes and whatnot, you still have a great margin for profit. And what you could do, and there's people who teach these type of car hacks and exotic car hacks, and there's all types of classes for this stuff, which I don't espouse. I don't think you need it. I think most of the time these things are really just arbitrage, just doing just that, buying in a market that's cheaper and selling in a market where cars go for more. You can buy an exotic car, and you have to be careful. You have to make sure it's okay and not damaged and all this stuff, but it requires knowledge. But again, this is it's a life hack. You can drive a super rare exotic car without it costing you anything, and in fact, having it make you money.
At the end of the day, it makes you money. But what about someone who doesn't have $200,000 to give that guy in Florida, or that used car dealer in Florida? Where is the way to get someone to loan you that money until you flip it and pocket that 40,000?
There's financing. There's special exotic car financing. A guy named Ed Bolian has a site called VinWiki, and he has a great YouTube channel that I watch regularly. He's awesome. He's like the car guy. So if you want to check out the VinWiki channel, that's VINWIKI. I've got no affiliation with him, but
that's a great hack. I want to do that. I love it.
Yeah. He shows you how to do that. And yeah, around Texas, you might be able to pick up cars go for less in Texas. California is one of the worst places, as is, some of the states where, you would expect it to be bad. But in other states like Texas, Florida, you can actually get them for significantly less. And if you know how to shop, if you know how to negotiate, right? All these things kind of come into play where you can do that. But here you go. So now you're driving an exotic car, but it's actually making you money. Life hack, right? You've learned how to hack the car that you drive, your transportation. You do the same with your house. I have a beautiful house near Abercrombie, which is a really fancy street in Venice. And when I buy my properties, what I do is I always make sure that there are either 2 buildings on there, or that I can build what's known as an ADU, or an additional unit, attached
ADU.
Unit.
That's what I'm talking about. ADU.
That I can rent. And 100% of the time, renting out that ADU pays the mortgage and then some. So owning that house is free. Someone's paying for it. I live on one side for free and I rent out the other side. And so my house makes me money. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think it's Robert Kiyosaki, talks about this. He talks about how your house is not an asset. And I remember looking at this and going, dude, my house is totally an asset. My car is everything I do is an asset. And on top of that, you can apply that to every aspect of your life when you're shopping. We can do a whole podcast. I teach it in my course of how to shop with little or no money and actually make money when you shop. It's completely possible. We do it all the time, right? There's all types of, like, for example, selling on Amazon. There's all types of websites that will give you free or near free product in hopes that you will buy it and drive their ranking up, and also for hopes that you will buy it. And out of the principle of reciprocity, we talk about Cialdini's influence and persuasion, that you will feel obligated to leave them a positive review because of Amazon's terms of service. Right. They cannot ask you publicly for a review, although the Chinese, Russian hacking community tends to do that now. They have no fear. But if Amazon catches on to that, they shut them down. So now what they do is they just go based on reciprocity. So there's ways, there's websites like Brad's Deals, which, free plug for them, amazing site, which this guy has a whole team of people that go all over the internet finding these ridiculous deals and posting them on a newsletter. And so, I've got a lot of students that just use that site to buy these deals from one site. Like they'll buy from Walmart and they'll sell on Amazon, and they'll buy from, Macy's if they're still in business, and they'll sell
on hundreds. Walmart. They buy hundreds or just buy single units?
Oh no, they buy hundreds, as many as they'll let them. Some products they put limits on them, but you can do that. So you can do that and it'll pay for itself. Like when Facebook came out with the new Oculus headset, they were going on Amazon for $200 more than what you could get them for at Best Buy. So all my people were just buying them from Best Buy, and Best Buy put a limit because they realized that we were buying them all out. So they put a limit on them. And then, the people in our course figured out a workaround. So we have this mastermind within the course, which is awesome because all the people are active Amazon sellers. So it's like all of a sudden you have close to 100 people that are doing the same business as you are. And everybody puts their mind together to solve these tricky problems of e-commerce, of selling on Amazon, selling on eBay, selling on Walmart, selling on Etsy, and all these different marketplaces. So it's like you've got a piece of a puzzle missing. Instead of working in a vacuum, which I always tell entrepreneurs, do not work in a vacuum. You all of a sudden have this, what some people call a hive mind of nearly 100 people that chime in and are like, oh yeah, no, I figured out how to get them from Best Buy. You can actually go pick them up from this store, that store, this store. And everybody in my course has the Oculus headset now because everybody kept one, because it is a seriously awesome piece of equipment, but they didn't pay for it. They got it for free. How did they get it for free? Well, they just bought a few extra and, I paid for it. And for the ones that were super crafty, they managed to make some money from it. So your house is paid for. You don't pay for your house. Right. And people are like, oh my God, look, look at the rich, look at these rich people. I'm like, yeah, because, we think smart, we work smart. So we don't pay for our house. Someone else pays for the house. Whoever's Airbnb-ing, my house by Abercrombie is paying for the mortgage. Right. And they're paying me. Whoever ends up buying whichever car I'm driving in the moment ends up paying for the car, paying for my transportation. Right. Yeah. Okay. I might have some minor repairs or stuff like that, but I know how to check out the cars to make sure that the repairs are minimal, and I don't drive that much, even though I'm in LA. So
let me address the mentality of that just real quick, because I have many friends on both sides of that aisle, and the ones that I hire to rehab my houses, they're poor. And they say things like, that guy's so selfish, and that guy's so tightwad. He doesn't spend any money. He's always looking for a discount. And their perception is, because we drive nice cars or have a bunch of houses, we're really rich and we should be throwing our money around, right? That's and I know this recently because during the COVID, I was working side by side with some of these people. I was like, wow, their language is food stamps, the cheapest place to eat, cigarettes. Like their language and what their conversation was the government's bad, rich people are bad. Like this is all they talked about. And you and I have conversations about the next business plan and what houses we bought this week. And it's a different conversation contextually, but not because of the quote money, but because of the interest level. Like what drives us? What's interesting? What's the core beliefs about it? My core belief is that the world is abundant, and that we can take our place in it, and we can be part of this whole community of exchange of goods. And I love the fact that you're like, hey, it's not selfish to have someone else pay your mortgage. You have to be smart about it. So, but I know you got money, Shaahin. Why don't you just pay rent? Why do you have to bother with all this ADU? What your brain goes, because that's stupid.
Oh, dude, let me tell you this. So a few years back, and I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but we met a couple. And this couple, super sweet people, salt of the earth people, but, they were in some financial trouble. So they invited us over to their house, and, we went over to their house. And mind you, still, to this very day, I rent out half of my house Airbnb, right? It's an attached house on the same.
Yeah, you don't see them. You don't have to deal with them.
I don't, occasionally, but I've got it systemized. My cars, like I said, they all make me money. Everything I do, every component of everything I do is hacked in a certain way. If I travel, we use airline miles. We travel first class everywhere.
Right.
Business class, now they don't have so much first class, but you can go business class everywhere. We stay at great hotels. We eat amazing meals, and everything somehow comes back to being net positive for us. Right. And people talk to me about this, and I'm going to tell you the story about this couple. Is that, so we sat down with them, and I looked at the stuff they bought, and like, man, like the wife, she's buying designer clothes for their, at that time, 5-year-old boy. Like, she's buying $90 shoes for a 5-year-old boy when they are broke. They were broke. Buying grass-fed organic filet mignon at Whole Foods. And I remember telling them, they're like, well, do you buy that? It's like $40 for 2 pieces. I'm like, no, I mean, I could eat that all day long, right? The money doesn't, the money is important. But what I do is I have a subscription service that is one of those, services where it's fantastic. It's called Crowd Cow, another great one. Also not affiliated with them, but I strongly recommend them. Where they take the whole cow and you kind of co-opt it between a bunch of people. Right. But it's a monthly fee, and you get an amazing amount of food for a very low price, much less than you would buy at Whole Foods, and much higher quality, mind you, as well. Because exactly where the sources are. They have relationships with the farmers. It's fantastic, but I don't pay much for it. And there's all kinds of coupons and monthly promotions and all that stuff involved, right? But I'm like, we do that like once a month. Like we spend $150 a month maybe for us and all our guests and family on meat that's, grass-fed, that's organic, that's, all that stuff. We won't go to Whole Foods and buy, 2 pieces of meat for $100. We just don't, right? Because everything that we do in our life is systemized and in a way gamified. And people are like, oh, well, don't you ever just want to like let your hair down? Sure, we do, right? And at times, we go out to eat, right? But if we go out to eat, oftentimes we meet people there. We can talk about business. It becomes a company expense. So there's very little in life where we are just constantly paying these premiums. And believe it or not, we actually live pretty lean. I mean, we shop mostly from Costco, right? We cook most of our meals, and we live a pretty like reasonable life. We don't, we're not, spending money like crazy. And I'll tell you, the millionaires I know and a couple of the billionaires I know, similarly, I run into them at Costco.
It's a game to be mindful about money. They gamified it's not like coupon collecting. Here's what I want to address you. I've heard in the New Age community, and as well as other of my friends, they have a poverty mentality. That's why they use coupons. Well, they can't go on to eat on a coupon. Like, I get if somebody grew up poor and they still have trauma about being poor. Like, I get why they would be compelled to like a deal. But at some point in your life, if you've got $10 million, do you need to shop at the retail shop? I say no, but you also don't need to shop at Neiman Marcus. That's also unnecessary as well, especially if you're a 5-year-old kid. It's like, at what point is it selfish or is it hacking money?
Oh, dude. So to wrap it up about this couple is that they drove themselves to financial ruin. Not because they couldn't be seen to, the husband couldn't go drive Uber and the wife couldn't go work at a restaurant, but they felt it beneath them. So they continued to be poor until it drove them bankrupt. Wow. And now, I hear from them every once in a while, and they're always in the same kind of financial turmoil. Right. And I'll tell you a funny story about me and my wife before we got married. We, of course, would date, and my wife liked to go out to dinner. And dude, I'm the kind of guy that I don't mind if I'm going out on a date, I will pull out a coupon. What do you care? Right? If you're not, if you are not cool with that, then whatever. So, and I had just gotten the brand new Porsche Turbo S, $145,000 sports car. I didn't pay that much, but I got a beautiful car. It was in the Porsche Silver. Loved this car. Picked her up in the Porsche. She'd come to LA.
She's like, "Oh, I've scored. This guy's gonna be loaded. Yeah. Woo-hoo!"
Yeah. Well, no, my wife was never like that. So I loved her. I still love her. One of the few, I think, women in my life that was not like that. Like she had her own money. She had her own her own success before me. But with that said, so we go out to this restaurant and I have this coupon, right? Which was like, I don't know, it was like 20% off or something, but I had printed it out. And I remember the waiter seeing that I was on a date, not count the coupon. And just bring the check, thinking that I wasn't going to bring it up because I was embarrassed. So the check arrives and we've had a nice dinner. I've had a few glasses of wine and a beautiful steak. And, we've had this great time. And I look at the check, which I always do, yet another thing. And he didn't include the 20%. So I look at him and I go, "Did you forget something?" And he goes, "Oh, no, sir. What would that be?" And I said, "My coupon." And I said it pretty loud to where people turned their heads. And I said, "Yeah, the coupon." And he goes, "Oh, what is he was playing dumb. He was like, what is what coupon, sir?" And she's just looking at me. And I said, "The 20% off coupon that I got on Yelp for your restaurant that I just put right there." And I was so brazen about it. I was not shy or coy or anything. And she was laughing laughing her ass off. She was not, in any way offended. But you know what? That's 20% money that I could leave towards an extra tip, or I would have, should he have not been a dick about it. Which is another thing that I firmly believe in, is rewarding excellent service with excellent tips. And I do that oftentimes. Sometimes I've been known to leave more than the check in a tip if the person really does take care of me. Right. But I also don't feel that I should leave excellent service. I will leave some for the other people working there, but I don't feel that you should reward them if they mistreat you or if they are not treating you well and not really being of service. But, at the end of the day, I have no shame about that. And similarly, I mean, my wife knew. I was like, you know what? If you're going to hang with me, we're going to make a lot of money, but we're also going to save a lot of money. So this is how I roll, right? And then, and it's fine. Because imagine if every meal you have, you save 20%, that's a lot of money at the end of the time. All that stuff adds up. And moreover, there's a principle to that. There's the principle of not just being frugal, but being efficient. And it's efficiency in movement, like in Shaolin and in Kung Fu. It's all about that efficiency of movement, how you move. In dancing, it's about the efficiency of movement. In business, it's about how you can be efficient in business, right? How you can use the minimum amount of pressure to achieve the maximum amount of effect. And it's like that with life. So the caveat with that is you don't always want to be, penny pinching and watching every cent and being a cheapskate and, spending more time saving money than that money affects or impacts your life.
Correct.
And right.
And that's drive across town for 3 hours to save $5 on tires. That doesn't make any sense. But it would make sense spending 10 minutes searching for coupons for tires instead of just rushing out and buying new tires. Why would you not do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know what? One of the hacks that people don't know, very practical hack that I learned some years ago, is you can punch in coupon code, discount code, gift code after anything that you're buying online and see what they have. You Best Buy coupon code. And these sites come up that are aggravators and scrapers on the internet of coupon codes that these companies put up. And you can save anywhere from 10 to 50% on things just by searching for coupon code or gift code.
One's called Honey, Honey. It's a plugin for Chrome. And every time I renew my domains, which I've got like 200 domains, right? I run Honey, and guess what? They give me another discount, and I'm a returning customer. They should not give me discounts.
Yeah.
And I hope they don't hear this, but I love it because this software automatically does everything and says, hey, do you want to try this code? Try this code. And I'm like, why not? It's $1.50. Why would I pay more? So I love that tip. It's good. So I didn't know this was going there. Saving money is cool.
Saving money is cool. You do want to be careful with that app, by the way, just so you know. It's an add-on to Chrome, and it does trace your purchases, and it may, I'm not saying that it does, but it may track what you're doing, and that data may or may not be sold. So make sure
sold
you
or
read the
stolen
terms of
by
service.
the Russians.
What's that?
Stolen by the Russians or sold to someone else?
I'm sure they're a great site. I'm sure everything about Honey is fantastic. All I'm saying is, I don't want to be liable because I don't know what their business model is, but you got to be careful with those Chrome plugins. So
I am taking down notes at everything you say. I did see a Chrome plugin for some kind of cryptocurrency. I was like, this feels really bad. This feels really, really suspicious. I'm definitely not putting a Google Chrome. Let me ask you a question. Just to put in perspective, because we're both over 40, at least I am, I finally sort of understood the concept of compound interest. But even though I read about it and understood it conceptually in my 20s, I didn't see it. And I sure didn't see until I looked at my dad's real estate portfolio, who's been doing this for 50 years, what compound interest. So if he saves $5 a day and then he put it in the stock market since he's 20, like explain how you see that by saving that $5 and $10 doesn't seem like much, just like it doesn't seem that much to spend $5 on a cup of coffee every day. But you're going in the wrong direction if you're spending $5 and $6 on coffee, but you're not investing $5 or $6 into a compound interest. Talk about that, because if anybody listening is under 30, I know you think you know about it, but it doesn't really hit you until you see a portfolio of $7 or $8 million, right? It doesn't hit you.
It's funny that you say that because I just bought a $10,000 coffee machine, which is funny. Right? I didn't.
And you're going to make money on it
for it, and I will probably be selling the $10,000 coffee machine at some point for more than what I paid for it.
That's what I want to hear.
So it's very much so the Ferrari of coffee machines, and it only took me 6 months to learn how to make a cup of coffee on the damn thing. So
did you tip yourself, or did you?
Oh, dude, I had to
argue over a coupon.
I had to have people over to tutor me. I had to have doing a video chat with the factory in Italy. Like, it's a whole world. But now I think I'm qualified to work at a Starbucks, just in case anybody from Starbucks Corporation is watching. So, but I save a lot of money because, I've got a slight addiction to really high quality third wave coffee. And now I buy it and, I make it at home for myself.
But you're not paying $7 a cup. You're paying $10,000. You'll resell the machine later, and you're paying 40 cents a cup.
Probably will make me money by the time I sell the machine. Although now I'm really loving this machine now that I know how to use it. So.
You may not give it up. Maybe it's like that girlfriend you liked, and then you married her. You're just like, I can't give this one up.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, if I do the math, I'll be like, you know what? If I keep this thing for 20 years. The amount of coffee I'm going to make on it's actually going to be net positive. And then I sell it in 20 years. But people keep them for a lifetime, It's a great machine. So, I think, and, I think we got to wrap up in a couple minutes. So where were we again?
I wanted to ask you how you explain and are going to explain to your kid compound interest.
Oh, compound interest.
How saving $5 or $10 a day doesn't seem like much. But if we'd have stuck it in Bitcoin 10 years ago, Shaahin, which I know both of us were playing in that field, but what would have happened if every time I saved $5, I jumped on boom. How do you explain that to someone under 30 years old listening?
So there's a fantastic book, a phenomenal book on just that called The Psychology of Money. And I think it is a canon on financial well-being. If I had that book when I was in my teens, if I had read that, it wasn't written then, but if I had read it in my teens, I would have been infinitely wealthier by now. And
if you'd applied it and read it, right?
If I read it and applied it, yeah, but I'm pretty good at applying stuff that I read, So I think, that book alone, I think is going to be one of the top life hacks. And maybe we'll get him on the show. He's a journalist, and we can ask to interview him, so I can reach out and see if he wants to be on the show. But I think his blog the guy that wrote that, his name escapes me now, but we can add it to the show notes. The Psychology of Money, fantastic way. He talks about Warren Buffett, the where they call him the Oracle of Omaha.
Omaha, yeah.
And how the reason why he's one of the top 10 wealthiest guys in the world, and there's other guys that make way more than him, but are not as wealthy as him, is just because of compound interest. It's just because the guy has been saving for so long. And by the way, a guy that lives pretty darn frugally, right? You see his house, right? It's a nice house, but it's not like, it's not MTV Cribs worthy, right? You see his office, he's got like a file cabinet, and Doreen, the secretary, bringing him his Coke and his
And what was his 2 rules? Do you remember? 1, don't lose money.
Yeah.
2, seal number 1. And I'll kind of wrap the show on this note. You played the game Monopoly. We all have as a kid, right? Maybe you've played the game of Cash Flow by Robert Kiyosaki. And what happens is 1 divorce, 1 bankruptcy, 1 bad partnership, you have to start over from 0. And so not losing money compared to losing half, it's a real uphill battle in Monopoly when someone takes your hotel. Like you can't win, right?
Yeah.
How do you address that concern as we wrap it up today?
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this before, and we can totally wrap it on this, is that one of the things I learned, and it seems so simplistic now that, I'm selling on Amazon, and, we're talking about foundational thinking, how you build the foundation for making money when you're a new seller on Amazon, when you're building e-commerce empire, and having that be one leg of the foundation, having another leg be real estate, having another leg, be some money in the stock market, and then having another leg be, what could be your job or your career. When we talk about that, one of the things that I always like to remember is something that I think is probably one of the most pivotal things for me, realizing that I'm really, really good at making money. I haven't been very good at keeping it. And the point that I'm making is that there are 2 parts to making money. Part 1, making it. Part 2, keeping it. And each part is equally as important. So with that said, Bart, if people want to get a hold of you or find you or to read your book, how can they do that?
Yeah, just jump me up on Twitter or Instagram, Bart Baggett, BartBaggett. I answer all the Twitter messages as well as Facebook. And stop by bartbaggett.com. All the books are there. You can obviously get some on Amazon, but just like if you do it to Amazon, I don't get your email address, and then you're getting my newsletters. You can't come to the webinars. I won't tell you about the new episodes. We love to have relationships with our fan base. So stop by bartbaggett.com and check out some of my books. Shaahin, if they want to learn more about your coaching and Amazon course, leave us with how they get a hold of that.
Yeah, so there's an Amazon Mastery course I actually have for listeners of Hack and Grow Rich, absolutely free 1-hour course, which is everything you need to know about getting started on Amazon. It'll take you all the way through how to incorporate, how to get reviews, how to pick your product, everything you need to know in a 1-hour crash course. And that's absolutely free. You can reach out to us on fbasellercourse.com or just email me at the link on my website, ShaahinCheyene.com. That's ShaahinCheyene.com. Also, I'd like to remind our guests to make sure to like and subscribe if you're listening to us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. If you feel like we brought value to you, please do us a favor and leave us a like, leave us a review as detailed as you can to help other people understand what this podcast is about. If you're watching us on YouTube or any of the other video platforms, make sure to subscribe and like, and subscribe also to the Billion podcast, Billion How I Became King of the Throw Pill Cult. The first episode is out now, and likely, depending on when you listen to this podcast or watch it, there will be additional episodes up on there. So please take a look at that, and the book will be coming out in the later part of this year. And I want to thank you guys all for taking a part of this. Bart, I want to thank you for being a part and co-hosting the show with me, and excited to see what we talk about next week.
All right. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Tune in.